Hey everyone, this is Hindsight of episode 5 of Dilemma, which was all about GMO warning labels with the wonderful Robin Hanson, in which I, amongst other things, admit that I went vegan to get laid from my girlfriend. Jesus. For those listening in the audio, the lovely girlfriend threw a pillow at me, and I survived. There is one thing that Robin Hanson said in the episode that I think we can dig into a lot and really see how it could go off the rails, because he's wonderful. I love, by the way, we mentioned it a lot, of course. Coleman and I are huge fans. The Elephant in the Brain is a fantastic book, so pick it up, put it on your list. You'll love it. But when he was talking about the sort of trust factor and almost this thought of, if they're holding this information from me, or they don't think I can handle this information, well, then what else are they hiding from me? As kind of a rationale and almost a defense of, putting a warning label on for something that or not even a warning label, just a label announcing that your product contains something like GMOs when you yourself know that it's perfectly benign and harmless. But again, do you trust your consumer enough to just put that information on the package and then let them not make a foolish decision? This was sort of Bill Nye's approach with put on proudly GMOs as a response to this madness, rather than what we see now, which is this GMO free project and these little butterfly labels that appear on just about every product I see in the store now. So, and of course the argument goes, we've seen them on things as silly as water, or what were they, salt was one of them, a GMO free salt, which is crazy because it's not an organism. Clearly salt is not anyway. So it's just gone off the rails. But when you see that as maybe a consumer, you automatically assume the product next to it that doesn't have this little butterfly in the corner has some nefarious product that they don't want to tell you about. And so it's this real just bind to be in for all of us. And then it does seem to put the onus on the consumer way too much to be able to, maybe it feels easy for us to know that, GMOs are harmless, but even that, it's putting a lot on the consumer to have that information and be able to parse all of these labels and do your homework. At some point, you do just want some regulation and some advisory board somewhere that you actually trust. This goes to Robin's point about trust, to do the work for you and just tell you thumbs up, thumbs down, and you're busy in the shopping at the grocery store, just buy the thing. So of course, a lot of this I say of course already, a lot of this madness seems to be popping up in California. This is where, I believe, if the research was correct, the first really aggressive, argument to label everything that contained a GMO was passed. And so using that same kind of, well, it's just information, and you have to tell your audience that that's in there, because what else are you hiding from them? Using that same logic, it's gone now in California to cancerous warnings in coffee shops. Oh, warning label on balsamic vinegar for being cancerous. Is that what we found? For lead. It has trace amounts of lead from the soil. I don't know how balsamic vinegar is made, but this is where it can go, where then everything is just, yes, and amusement parks. So to dovetail perfectly with Robin Hanson's example of my favorite line from the episode of the curious thing about warning labels is that they never tell you that you're not having enough fun. And we use sort of the you go to an amusement park and, a roller coaster, there's no label that says, by the way, this might hurt you, but you're going to have a ton of fun. So go do the thing. In California, there are warning labels all over amusement parks for possible lead in the paint. Anyway, you can use this rationale, as you can see, and just go full on into maybe crazy world. And I don't envy a hypochondriac who has to live in that world and fear every product on the shelf. But it's a real conundrum. I wanted to shift this a little bit to the GMO question, and in particular, what I think is, it's been fascinating to get into it a little bit, what is on our doorstep of the sort of new alternative food or alternative meat wars. You may have heard of Beyond Meat. and Impossible Foods, or Impossible Burger and the Beyond Burger, and they're starting to infiltrate. I think it's great, sort of the mainstream market, popping up in grocery stores. I guess Beyond Meat has the contract with Whole Foods, and a bunch of fast food restaurants. I think Dunkin' Donuts now here in Manhattan has a Beyond Meat sausage patty that's on the regular menu. I think Burger King in all of the stores has an Impossible. I think that Impossible got Burger King. White Castle also has Impossible, or Impossible has White Castle, etc. So this is cool, and apparently you could keep your eyes sort of on the news. The big prize is who's going to get McDonald's, which I believe is still like our biggest beef producer or seller in America. But this is interesting because this puts a real it's maybe surprising, this sweet spot of or unsweet spot. There's too many food puns to make there, with environmentalists, or some environmentalists, who find themselves in a real bind where they, I think on some level, want to embrace the plant-based meats as, of course, alternatives to the horror show of factory farming and potentially, however you feel about the consciousness question, which hint is our next episode, is a terrible ethical situation that we're in, to embrace the plant-based meat, and also, of course, the environmental impacts of where people, I'm sure, have noticed the forest fires in the Amazon. A lot of that is cleared land for cattle grazing. All of those problems that go along with mass production of meat and beef seem to be addressed, or maybe a little bit mitigated, by the introduction of plant-based meat. The health question you could sort of put on the side just for now, but the question that they seem to be having is that there are GMOs. They just basically are GMOs, plant-based meat. In particular, it's this thing that Impossible Meat has isolated called heme. It's a hemoprotein that they have discovered, if you sort of believe their research, discovered is the thing that you're really craving when you crave meat. And they've isolated that, and now they are synthesizing that and making a synthetic version of that, I think through soy, and then using that and mixing that with their plant mix, and have created this really cool product. I think they taste pretty good, and a pretty good meat imitation, but it's a GMO. So now suddenly you have, I'll read some of these. This is from the Friends of the Earth, an environmental advocacy group, I suppose. I could read some of this. So this is from the Friends of the Earth website, from a article called "Is Food Tech the Future of Food?" There's a lot of questions that they go through here, but there's specifically a little paragraph here called "Where are the labels?" Investors and companies are excited to use new genetic engineering techniques, but are doing everything they can to pull the wool over consumers' eyes. Some of their new products are even being mislabeled as non-GMO or natural, despite being derived from genetically engineered organisms and grown in a lab. These companies are letting transparency fall by the wayside while they focus on marketing their products. Will the Impossible Burger tell customers that secret ingredient is a protein derived from genetic engineering? Polls consistently show that consumers want GMOs to be labeled as such on the packaging, but so far, companies selling products with new GMOs are staying silent, including Impossible Foods. Will consumers trust companies like PepsiCo that spent heavily to keep them in the dark on whether they are eating first-generation GMOs? And will companies promoting the next generation of GMOs learn that they can't hide the truth about what they are feeding people? It's very weird. I recommend trying to read some of this stuff because the cognitive dissonance seems alarming. Actually, Robin, somewhere in the episode, does mention that at some point we trust experts, and it's why trust in experts is so vital. And again, I hope he writes that next book that he mentioned about trust in institutions and how to build it. But it seems like all of their questions are just leaning on this trust kind of thing, because the questions are not scientific or they're not grounded even in a consistent morality in the Friends of the Earth. You think they would be embracing something like this, but so, as Coleman often points out, I think the hesitancy or dislike of GMOs is really just a recast of the naturalistic fallacy, where, if I say the word to you like healthy, sustainable growth and food, the images that pop into your mind might be some, down-home farmer with his, little patch of land somewhere and the sun rising and his overalls on and some beautiful little scene, and not this. I'll show you what Impossible Burger's food looks like. Okay, so here is what sustainable plant-based growth might look like. So there you go. If I describe this for people listening, it's people wearing safety glasses, it's white lab coats, it's a test tube right now. They're wearing hairnets, white lab coats, blue rubber gloves. It looks like a science lab. This is not a farm somewhere in Nebraska. These are the labs where they are creating impossible food. It's just real interesting right now because on some level, the environmentalists, I don't say that derogatorily, I'll say the friends of the earth, kind of what I'm getting from their website of this resistance to that, is that image to them strikes them as, I don't know, humans playing God, unsustainable, unintended consequences. And to be fair, the unintended consequences of GMOs is the last hurdle that Bill Nye had to jump before he sort of, got on of like, we should really be embracing this stuff. It's fascinating. I think it's rather quite revealing. On a political note, what I think I really fear here is this is going to be an interesting run with alternative meat. Beyond Burger is publicly traded company. Impossible has an IPO coming out soon. These are big companies. This is a big industry. They are fighting the good fight. I think their products are really, really good and really quite compelling. I think as soon as they are cheaper, tastier, and just as healthy, there's really no argument to not eat them over the cow or chicken or whatever other meat is out there. But I think this will probably handcuff itself depressingly to more of the left, right, coastal elite, middle America culture wars that are exhausting. I just see that coming down the pipeline. I don't see how I could be wrong about that. You could hear the sentence already of like, they're trying to take your guns and now your hamburger out of your hands. And as a way of life, this kind of thing and the attachment to it. But very oddly, the bedfellows of that kind of mentality seem to maybe be the naturalistic fallacy being committed by certain environmental groups who look at the thing that I just showed, at least the video here and described here. You should go check out their website, see how these things are made. It's kind of fascinating, as somehow dangerous, unhealthy, and maybe also a bit of a culture war, even for those kind of environmentalists. Anyone who knows me knows how much I love David Deutsch. I'm thrilled to expose him. I'm thrilled to expose you to his work in a future episode, but he writes really compellingly about this notion of the word sustainable that I just can't help bringing up again here to preview a bit of his work, where if you really think about this word sustainable and sustainability, there's almost two totally diametrically opposed definitions of the same word, where one views this notion of sustainable as some sort of finding a perfect equilibrium between the natural evolution of us as a species and the planet that we evolved on, where we can sort of like flatten the graph of everything forever and find this perfect sustainable kind of balance, like finding sustainability that way, where there's almost this totally diametrically opposed definition of it, of sort of sustainable growth and sustainable progress. And it's almost that you can see these two definitions of sustainability at odds in this particular conversation, where you can describe the plant-based meats as a sustainable solution versus the organic farms with animals that maybe are treated better as some sort of sustainable solution that kind of, don't match each other there. So anyway, you could really actually imagine being the CEO of Beyond or Impossible right now and trying to, as Friends of the Earth points out, market your product. I mean, what else would they be doing? But imagine putting on sort of a like, by the way, this is a GMO product. And would that hurt your sales? Would that hurt very much your image? It's like, in some ways, maybe this is the perfect opportunity for Bill Nye's dream of saying proudly GMO, where the product itself, it is already such a, let's call it good product that appeals to the right kind of desire that people have for themselves, for the earth, for their kids, all of that plant-based. It sounds great already. It's like not killing an animal, all of these lovely things to just put on it like proudly made through the process of technology. This word GMO has just become, I think, radioactive for these people, but maybe this is the opportunity to really embrace that. And I like actually that they do it in their video of embracing it. It's like they're not trying to hide this. They're not trying to show some sunrises and, cows. This is a lab, and they're using real science to try to answer these questions. So anyway, I'm a big fan. So whether that had to do with the episode or not, the episode was super, super fun. I'm going to shift now to next episode, which is called Conscious Robots. And it features Eric Hoel. I have to tell you, I recorded the most fun video that I've ever... I had the most fun making a video that was an introduction to consciousness and the questions that sort of come up a lot when you begin probing that question. If you've never waded into the waters of the mystery of consciousness or the hard problem, philosophical zombies, dualism... if the problem of other minds, if those terms are all totally kind of new to you and you have no idea what I'm talking about, you might want to check out that video. It is on YouTube. I don't think you could just listen to it, so we didn't put it out in the podcast because I used some really, really great video effects. I'm just kidding. They're super cheesy. I did a really quick post-production job, but I had a ton of fun. I split myself in it. And anyway, there's all kinds of fun things. But I recommend watching it and seeking it out if you can. We'll put it in the description here if you're listening to this on one of the podcast apps. Or you could go, of course, actually, I don't mention it enough. This entire podcast is under the group This Is 42, which is a group that I work for and with and produce content for. It's based in Australia, but we are growing very rapidly with content like this, and very soon doing some really cool live events, one in New York and one in LA. I can't tell you who the guest is yet, but you're going to want to keep an eye on it. So you could go to This Is 42 and find it through that, or find This Is 42 on YouTube and find the video that way, thisis42.com, which is a reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and 42 being the meaning of life, if you've never read that book. But I recommend watching that video. It was silly, it was fun, it was about consciousness, because next episode, Eric Hoel is a genius researcher and scientist, real hard scientist. He's not quite philosophy or psychology. He's a scientist trying to find answers out there in the space of consciousness. And he studied with Giulio Tononi, who, if you do know philosophy of mind and kind of consciousness researchers, you probably have heard his name. He pioneered a theory called integrated information theory, and it is, in simple terms, a way to try to build a scientific model to find and measure consciousness. Where is it, and can you measure it? Almost like building a divining rod to point at objects or other people or animals or whatever and see how conscious they really are, and potentially what they are conscious of. It's very complicated. So this is why I made a primer video, because Coleman and I we love this subject and we dive right in and start just sort of like tearing meat off of the bone. And if you're into that kind of stuff, you're going to love the episode. It's a dense one. I promise you it's worth it to get into it. You'll hear my plea in the video about the consciousness questions that it's the most fun subject I think there possibly is. And it leads just to insane directions. The particular dilemma of that episode doesn't even really matter. It's basically a researcher builds a robot or an AI. We even talk about if that's possible, and is faced with unplugging it when it's telling him, "Hey, I'm conscious. Please don't turn me off." Very much like HAL in 2001: A Space Odyssey, or Ex Machina. Ton of movies and TV shows, obviously, are all over this question of conscious robots. So we dive into it and take a stab at it with the one of the best people we could possibly have. It's Eric Howell. Anyway, I talked a lot about a lot of things, and my girlfriend threw a pillow at me. So thank you for listening and being a part of this already. It's super fun. I'll say we're going through a really cool stretch now as fall and winter come of guests on Dilemma. Eric Howell is next, of course, but coming up we have Sean Carroll, who has a new book coming out. Looks amazing. David Deutsch, of course, who I mentioned, my favorite. Matthew Crawford, who's an incredible writer. Matthew B. Crawford, if you know his work. Rebecca Goldstein. Steven Pinker. It's just like a stretch of really great thinkers and great minds. Lisa Tessman. And some really heavy episodes coming up that are about death and things like that. So tell all your friends about this awesome new podcast called Dilemma. Get them into it because it's about to get really, really good. Not that it hasn't been amazing already, but we're going even stronger. So, also it's Tuesday, not Monday. We took Monday off, which is today when I'm recording it. So I guess I didn't take it off, but it's Labor Day and it rained all day here in New York. So I'm not sure what you did, but I hope you had a good Labor Day. And I hope you enjoy what's coming next. Go try an Impossible Burger or a Beyond Meat Burger too. They're really good. Tell me what you think. Bye.